Oh yeah, that would be good. Oh, here we are. Welcome everybody to Unbiased America Spotlight. Again, we have with us David J. Shestokas, author of Constitutional Sound Bites. We got the glare there. There we go. We've had three parts prior to this. You can watch those all on YouTube under the Liberty.me channel if you want to watch the first three. You can also buy his book and follow along. Last show we left off on Benjamin Franklin and his role in the drafting of the Constitution. And I'm really surprised that a lot of people don't talk about Benjamin Franklin's role in drafting the Constitution. So if you can give us some more information on that, that'd be great. And I just want to point out that you've already helped me step up my game here. I have a code on this time. And like I said before the show, you're really pushing me in the right direction. So thanks for that, too.
Well, now you've got me relaxed, and I went without a coat this time. So
we're keeping each other on our toes.
Yeah. You've got me more relaxed, and I've got you a little spruced up. This whole video thing is very interesting compared to. Of course, I did 3 years of radio. You could go in your shorts and t-shirt or whatever, So
that's true, though. I'm not gonna actually confirm or deny if I'm wearing shorts right now.
Okay, that's way TMI, and so we'll just get back to Ben Franklin, which we mentioned at the end of the last show. We gave a bit of a prelude to Franklin, and one of the things, of course, we seem to come back to this every show, is this issue of rich old white guys, and Franklin was, in fact, a rich old white guy. But I'd like to point out that one of the things that some people, in diminution of the founders, when they talk about it, it's usually rich old white guy slave owners. Ben Franklin never owned a slave, didn't have a slave. He was never a slave owner, which is something important to note about Franklin. And he was the really old guy. He was 81, but
wasn't he part of the abolitionist movement too? Him and Benjamin Rush. Yeah.
Yes, he and Dr. Rush were part of the abolitionist movement that moved to abolish slavery in Pennsylvania. Mm-hmm. And so, yes, he not only was not a slave owner, he was active in trying to get rid of slavery.
That's very interesting.
So, yeah, no, Ben Franklin was kind of a different animal, and not the least of which is he was older. But one of his crucial claims to fame is he's the only man that was a signer of the Declaration of Independence, that was a signer of the Treaty of Paris, which resolved things between Great Britain and the 13 states, and a signer of the Constitution. No other man was present nor part of the creation of the Declaration of Independence, creation of the adoption, the actual documents that settled the matter, and and conducted the negotiations. He was critical in having the country go beyond the borders of the existing colonies all the way to the Mississippi River. And then, of course, he participated as an elder statesman in the Constitution. He was also our first ambassador to France. The original ambassador to France was very, very popular with the French folks. He learned to speak French very, very well. And he also was popular for trying to pretend to be a North American bumpkin. He played that up well, and his picture was on coins and paintings, and he was extraordinarily popular with the French. So one of the reasons that the French ultimately intervened in the war and were so critical at the end of the war, in Cornwallis's surrender at Yorktown, when they sent the French Navy up from the Caribbean to surround the British in Yorktown from the sea, was Benjamin Franklin.
Wow, it's interesting. Those are the things people don't really know about Benjamin Franklin,
Yeah, and so his input, his wisdom, is not understood how absolutely critical he was to the birth of the United States of America.
I think his most well-known line is the is the story. I'm not sure. I'm not sure how true it is, but the story of him leaving the Constitutional Convention and a woman asked him, "What have you given us, sir?" And he says, "A republic, ma'am, if you can keep it." Is that
It's an absolute. It's absolutely accurate.
okay?
That's an absolutely true story, and it's well known. He's also got a couple of other. Well, he's got obviously a tremendous amount in Poor Richard's Almanac of important quotes, but he is also the one that when the Declaration of Independence was issued, and he had placed his signature on it. Speaking of signatures, big John Hancock at the end.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, John Hancock was the first guy to sign it. He was the president of the Continental Congress at the time, and he wrote that huge, big, famous signature. And when he did that, he says, "There, I think King George will be able to read that."
That's pretty
so,
cool.
but at the conclusion of the issuance of the Declaration, Ben Franklin is the one that also said, "We will all hang together, or surely we will all hang separately."
Can you give us a little context of, speaking of John Hancock's signature, the gravity of what these guys were doing when they did sign the Declaration? I mean, what were they really giving up in context at the time? I mean, today people look at, oh, they just signed a document, no big deal. But what was it really like back then?
What it was really like back then was they were committing treason against the crown, and treason, which is covered actually in the book with the penalties for treason against the crown. At the time they did that, included being originally drawn and quartered, and then disemboweled.
Oh my God! Talk about cruel and unusual.
And then burned. Finally beheaded and having your head put on a pike.
So these guys were giving up an awful lot to sign that declaration.
Oh my goodness! When they were serious when they pledged their lives, their sacred honor, to the goals as outlined in the Declaration of Independence. They were literally putting their lives on the line. When one of these episodes, we're going to come back and we're going to talk a little bit about the famous painting of Washington crossing the Delaware. Everybody knows the painting. Nobody knows the backstory, why the painting is so famous. And if Washington doesn't cross the Delaware, there's no Constitution. I mean, this was serious business. They were not. They were in big trouble, and the king was certainly interested in catching and killing all these guys.
It's amazing. I mean, yeah, these guys put so much on the line, and it's so contra Charles A. Beard, who I think contemporary political science departments love to have students read. I mean, the guy that said, this is just a bunch of elitists trying to protect their wealth. I mean, essentially, that's kind of a colloquial standpoint of Beard's book, but it's really the opposite. I mean, these guys put their wealth and lives on the line. So clearly, it was for, like we talked about in previous shows, they really believed in this philosophy, these inalienable rights.
That's utterly the case. When you talk about I don't want to get ahead of us. We're going to talk about those kinds of aspects of this, but it's important for people to know this history, to understand this is part of our heritage, and how that people really did put their lives on the line for these inalienable rights that we are so blessed to have.
Mm-hmm. So going from Franklin, the role of now Jefferson's interesting because Jefferson was in France, correct, at the time of the Constitutional Convention. He wasn't in the States at that time, correct?
He was the second ambassador to France. He succeeded Ben Franklin, whom he said he couldn't replace. He could only succeed, and so he succeeded Ben Franklin as the ambassador to France. At the same time, John Adams John Adams wasn't here either. He was in England, and the ambassador to the court of King James.
He had correspondence with Madison at the time, right? He had a little influence.
Jefferson, as the writer of the Declaration of Independence, who, by the way, again, dispelling this other business, 33 years old when he wrote the Declaration of Independence. I always feel bad about that. I only started law school when I was 33. Some of these guys had accomplished so much by that time by the time when I finally got around to getting to law school.
Hey, well, I can eat 2 whole pizzas by myself, so beat that, Tom Jefferson.
Thomas Jefferson. Well, I tell you what, a lot of the Declaration of Independence and the drafting and the negotiations, and in fact Jefferson's selection as the drafter, took place in a tavern in Philadelphia called City Tavern, that is still in business today.
Wow.
Last December, I was in Philadelphia, and I had some ale that was made to Thomas Jefferson's recipe.
Wow.
So City Tavern in Philadelphia is one place anybody interested in any of this should go, because it's like full of ghosts.
Very cool. I would love to stand in City Tavern and think about what those guys discussed, you know?
Absolutely, absolutely. At any rate, Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence. I do think that he would be smiling at what is going on politically today, because both from the standpoint of either Trump or Sanders, Jefferson was really, really big on upsetting the established order. One of the things in the Declaration of Independence that people mention, the rights to life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, inalienable. What they don't mention on a regular basis, or almost never, is the provisions that he wrote in there about the right of revolution.
Mm-hmm.
The right of revolution, and the right of the people, anytime the government becomes destructive of those ends, that is, for supporting life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, i.e., as you note from time to time, it's kind of adopted from Locke's property.
Yep.
So
So basically, it's a natural right for the people to overthrow a despotic government, just as we have a natural right to property.
that's a natural right to overthrow a despotic government, and that influence is seen in the Constitution in a variety of ways. One of which certainly is periodic elections. They've tried to build in a bloodless revolutionary process with the periodic elections, with the amendments, and new concept in the world, impeachment. The only way to get rid of a head of government before the Constitution, assassinate him.
Oh,
You know?
So impeachment's a better substitute, I suppose.
Well, and we'll flip back to Franklin for a moment. At the Constitutional Convention, the impeachment provision was in fact Ben Franklin's idea, and he proposed and pushed it, indicating that they really needed some sort of process to get rid of the chief magistrate should he become obnoxious. And so rather than assassinate or kill, which was typically what happened to Julius Caesar, what happened to Oliver Cromwell, what happened to the previous kings of England that people didn't like. They killed them.
Yep.
They killed them.
And they can also impeach judges too in the Supreme Court, correct?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
You can remove judges from the Supreme Court. You can impeach any federal office holder.
Mm-hmm.
As a result, it's you think of it in terms of the president because that's the most dramatic. But there's been, I think, 15, 20, I don't remember the number, but there's been multiple impeachments of federal judges in the history of the country. The impeachment process, strangely enough, is not something that necessarily applies to members of Congress, but they have the ability to remove and discipline their own membership, and so there's a different method for them. But so the right of revolution that Jefferson expressed in the Declaration became expressed in the Constitution through these various procedures that didn't previously really exist as institutions anywhere in the world. There was periodic elections for Parliament, and that was developing, but the idea of regular periodic elections and the idea of amending the Constitution would be an outlet for the right of revolution. And of course, if the government ultimately doesn't pay enough attention. So at any rate, Jefferson would be really thrilled with Trump and Sanders.
Okay. We have 1 minute left, but let me get your definitive opinion here. Would I be going too far as saying that the Constitution should really be read in the light cast by the Declaration of Independence?
It's precisely why the book includes the Declaration, the Constitution, and the Bill of Rights. The Constitution and the Bill of Rights ultimately express and execute the principles and the ideals set forth in the Declaration of Independence.
So the Declaration of Independence created the nation and put down the verities that the nation espoused, and the Constitution was the legal document that protected these rights of the sovereign people that was delineated in the Declaration of Independence.
Precisely. If you read the Constitution without reading the Declaration of Independence, you do not get the Constitution.
That's very interesting, because the Declaration is rarely mentioned. You know, the Constitution is always brought up, but rarely is a Declaration ever really brought up or discussed in contemporary political debate.
Well, it's uncomfortable for an established government to acknowledge a right of revolution.
Good point. I want to thank you for coming on UA Spotlight. This is the end of our series for this month. We'll have you again next month, sometime in June, to discuss more about the book. I think it's really interesting, and I think it's pivotal to get this information out there, and you're so good at disseminating it. Please buy Constitutional Sound Bites by David J. Shestokas. Also follow him on Twitter at Shestokas, which is Shestokas. And you can also follow him on Facebook, David Shestokas. And we'd love to have you back. I could talk about the Constitution all day, all the time, as you know. And I'm sure you can too. But thanks again, and I hope you come back.
Looking forward to being back. Well, I enjoy this, and this is just really great. And I hope your audience appreciates this as well.
All right, for Unbiased America, I'm Ricciardella, and I'll see you folks next time.